All right. Well, welcome everyone. Happy Thursday. I feel like we're kind of moving into the holiday mode. It's like kind of like we're working, but like it feels like we're about to not work, which is a nice feeling. So I met my guest today, Melissa Lee, on her own podcast, and she was just saying the name's changed to Thriving with Nourished Male Health, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
that's it.
So she's a functional health coach. She does a lot of work with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is actually a very common, maybe the most common hormonal imbalance in women. But since our audience isn't all with that, we asked her to do a little bit more broad perspective on hormonal imbalance, weight issues, blood sugar issues, because it all ties in together. So I'm hoping we can get in some questions and then just kind of give everybody listening kind of a philosophy to understand their own hormones and blood sugar better, because it can be super frustrating. But the more you learn, the more you're able to manage your own hormonal health. So welcome, Melissa.
Hi, Bridgit. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, usually I talk about polycystic ovarian syndrome and a lot of like to women in their reproductive years. So I'm really excited now to be talking about, beyond 40, what's happening to your body, because I feel like it's very complicated to some women and they're like, I don't know what's happening, why can't I lose weight? And so hopefully we'll get to the root cause of all that today.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So we're going to kind of concentrate on hormones after 40. And
Yeah.
and as you move in your 40s, if you do have PCOS, it's still there. It's still affecting you.
Not
um,
going anywhere.
yeah. But then even if you maybe had more normal periods while you were in your reproductive years, inevitably things will change in your 40s, or at least by 50, because your hormones just naturally change as you move towards menopause. So there can be a lot of fallout. Before we go into that, maybe you can just people more like, how did you become an expert in all this?
Oh, sure. So I started off in the whole wellness space, becoming a personal trainer, and I trained a lot of women, and most of them, they were coming to me trying to out exercise their way off out of a bad diet, or they're still lacking sleep, they're still really stressed. And they started to ask me like, what should I eat, all these kind of things. And I was like, you know what, I feel like I can help you more than just telling you how many squats to do or how many lunges to do. So I decided to be a health coach. And when I got into this work, I realized that there's a lot of pillars of health that are very interconnected, and hoping to share that with you today. And also I realized that a lot of women are very overwhelmed and bombarded by this wealth of information that's happening, and like you don't know what's working for you. And I really wanted to hone in on that. I started off with PCOS because I have PCOS myself, and I got off the birth control pill. Um, and I managed to kind of, regulate my hormones and just have lesser PMS symptoms and all that, just with like lifestyle interventions. And the more I got into like hormone work and education, I realized there's a lot going on and a lot happening. And the way we look at things is very like segmented. We look at the gut and the heart differently, or we look at hormones and thyroid very separate, but it all actually very connected. And so, yeah, this is why I got into functional medicine. So I'm at the School of Applied Functional Medicine now, and they're all about seeing the big picture and finding the root cause of hormonal imbalances.
Awesome. I think it's so true. Most mainstream women will try to like just exercise more to manage their weight in midlife. And yeah, they're like still drinking wine, or they're taking
Mm-hmm.
takeout and not getting enough sleep. My audience is not like that. They're very, very educated. Uh,
That's
but
good to know.
they are. But honestly, you almost like have to have a PhD to like understand hormones well. Like they're very confusing. So since we
Yeah.
talk about the big picture, can you give us a big picture of what's changing about our hormones as
Mhm.
we age and kind of out after 40?
Yeah, for sure. So We always think about in the 30s, you're like in the reproductive age or the years. And so we want to think about, okay, beyond 40, what happens is that our ovarian function starts to wind down. So ovulations stops happening. And this is why, you go through the whole perimenopause phase and your periods start disappearing. And over time, you get to a menopausal stage where you don't have periods anymore. And I think this is a very stressful time for women because they're like trying to cling on to like their past self, but actually this is like a transition into what's beyond reproduction. Like how can you show up in the world? How can you serve your family or your friends in a different way? How can you actually start taking care of your body in a different way? And that's like the whole mindset piece we can talk about later. So once ovulation starts, stop happening, progesterone is actually being made from the adrenal glands instead of the ovaries. So I'm sure all your listeners know we have estrogen and progesterone, and they usually balance each other out. And so for women, beyond 40, your progesterone actually starts decreasing in the years before that. And while that happens, estrogen is still being produced. We are still getting estrogens, for example, like from chemicals in our environment, the xenoestrogens from like beauty products, from animal conventional meats. And so all of that is still happening. Like we're still getting a lot of estrogen. If you have body fat, if you're obese, for example, body fat in it itself can produce estrogen. And additionally, your body is still producing androgens, which are like testosterone and other male hormones, and those can be converted into estrogen as well. So if you think about it, your body's like, okay, you have so much estrogen coming in from all these sources, but at the same time, your progesterone is decreasing, and progesterone is only now being made in the adrenal glands. And so when we think about adrenal glands, we also think about cortisol, and cortisol is our stress hormone. So if you think about it, women after 40 have to really, really focus on the stress management piece, because once you're really stressed or you're still working really, really hard, you're going in like the burnout phase, cortisol is still being prioritized at being made over progesterone. And so now if you have progesterone only being made in the adrenals, your adrenal glands is not going to be like, oh, it's time to make progesterone. If you're really stressed, it's obviously still going to be pumping out cortisol to help you survive. So the biggest thing here when we talk about, perimenopause or even menopausal years, is to really, really focus on the stress piece.
Yeah, which sometimes people don't want to hear because they're like, oh, that's like, maybe you can share some of like your favorite like little practical ways to actually do that. What are some of your favorites?
Yeah, I know people are like already tell me about it. So stress, my favorite ways are finding like 3 minutes in the morning or a few minutes every single like 1.5 hours. So I would do work for an hour and a half, and then I'll take like a few minutes break or a 20-minute break. And those are the break where you can find rest, or you can get your body to relax, or get your brain to get rid of all the metabolic waste or data that has been building while you've been working. So try to do things that do not require much like thinking, like water your plants, go for a walk. Deep breathing is really, really key. I like, for example, putting my hand over my chest and just feeling myself breathe. All of these things sound really simple, but once you start to do them, you realize how disconnected you are from your body. Yeah.
I like this. So you're saying you do a little chunk of work and then you take a few minutes off to not do any mental work. I love that. That's really easy. And I think we just sort of have an urge for it that we maybe ignore, but we have that urge to rest. Yeah, and I like how you said water the plants or something, because that's one thing I love about working at home.
Yeah, totally.
Sometimes you're like, I don't want to think right now. I'm just gonna like do a load of laundry or like whatever, just something mindless, and you do kind of need that. So yeah, and I'm with Matt, it's having you don't have to make as much cortisol or whatever just to like veg out and fold laundry. So Awesome. Cool. I love that tip.
Yeah, it's kind of like working out. Like if you do a really hard workout, you need to rest. So it's the same thing with like being on the computer and doing work. Your brain needs to rest. There's a lot of waste being built up.
Mm,
And if you have pets, it's even better. Take a pet break. Like I always take a cat break, and I would go like
good advice.
play with them or whatever. Like it's so stress relieving.
That's a great tip. I've been sharing, I didn't tell you most, but I have a concussion right now. So I'm
Oh,
trying to like kind of half work, but like, yeah, like today I had 2 interviews. So I'm like, but I was just taking a break before you. And so it's like, yeah, you can tell when your brain is extra fatigued, like it does need those rest periods. So it's such a great tip. And it's sort of what makes life juicy and joyful, right? Like, you make your cup of tea, you sit in the sun, and I feel like we could all make like a actual list if we want of like what are little things in the day that we enjoy. And when you can like actually make sure you stack those in and appreciate them, just a normal work day or errand day or whatever can be like so much more enjoyable and relaxing when you're like, oh, I got to like snuggle my cat or like whatever.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. The whole working from home thing, it can turn into a very pleasant thing. Like you have all your comforts around you. Really depends on how you look at it.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the adrenals. This age is actually the most common age to be diagnosed with thyroid, hypothyroidism, or autoimmune thyroid
hmm
issues. Can you talk about what the thyroid is going through at this age?
Yeah, so the thyroid, it's responsible for cellular metabolism, which means that it kind of like gives fuel to all your cells in the body. So I have a saying to my clients, if you have a sluggish thyroid, you have sluggish everything. So your digestion's not working properly, you're feeling tired, you're feeling cold, you can't generate heat, you might have resilience to exercise, you can't get out of bed, everything that's kind of sluggish. And so I see why women would have hypothyroidism or autoimmunity developing is because number one, their immune system is weak,
Mm.
perhaps from a decade or more of like working and not eating very well. The second thing is like the intestinal permeability, so like the gut lining is kind of being teared open because we ate too much dairy or gluten or anything that's kind of inflammatory to our bodies. And obviously it differs from person to person. And so the thyroid begins to be really affected because the body's like going into this inflammatory state over time. And once you hit 40, you're probably, you've already had more than 10 years of like not only working, but having kids, taking care of kids, taking care of everybody except yourself. So your body's not being taken care of, and so your adrenals are being tanked. And then as a result, your thyroid, which is very linked to your adrenals, it sits up here, and that's going to be tanked too. And it's no surprise that people get hypothyroidism at this age.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love how you explain that. Like you just wore out your immune system by like not being wearing yourself out for 10 years. Yeah, I have a friend who has 4 kids, and she was sharing recently, she was like reminiscing with her sister, and she was just like, where did the last like decade go? It just like
I
flew
know.
by. She was so busy. And now
Yeah.
she is like in the same age group as me and like trying to clean up so much about her health and like can't
hmm
lose weight even though she exercises and that kind of a thing. So would you say that adrenal thyroid link, like the thyroid is trying to overwork when the adrenals are overworked, or is it like the tissue being attacked from the other weakness in the body, or a combination?
Well, I think they work in harmony because you need thyroid hormone in all your cells, including your adrenal glands, to work. So once, it starts up here and, once that's affected, it's like I have no more fuel to go on. Your adrenals, it keeps pumping out cortisol, but over time, it's also going to get tired. And so everything starts to slow down. So you basically imagine yourself like at a really, really go, 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 go pace, and then over time that just starts to slow down. That's how I like to think about it. And so your body is like, you know, kind of cueing you now. Whatever pain points you have is going to worsen. So for example, if you have thyroid problems, you have cramping, maybe all those points are going to be worsened if you don't take care of your stress levels going beyond 40.
That reminds me of, often we see the high TSH lab, right? Thyroid stimulating hormone. So that's the brain telling the thyroid to work. And I just reviewed this with a woman recently. She was such a great client because she's like, I'm just running all these tests kind of preventatively, but she's right around this age and her thyroid labs were so interesting. I was like, your brain is really telling your thyroid to work hard, and it's kind of working. It's like on the edge, but to see that signal be so elevated, it's kind of what you're talking about right here. It's like your body's still forcing this activity. So it's like you're running a race for 10, 20 years, really. And then you're at the end of the race, you can't make it. You're starting to collapse.
It's great that you brought up the thyroid testing, because another thing I see is a lot of women have hypothyroidism that gets missed by the doctor. So like your TSH can be, optimal or low. And what we're looking for is the conversion of T4 to T3. So T3 is the form of thyroid hormone that's really the active form, and you really want that to get into the cells and do work. And what can affect the conversion is, number one, stress. Number two, lack of nutrients. So if you're not eating properly, if you don't have a lot of like selenium, vitamin A, vitamin D, if your immune system is compromised, a lot of that conversion doesn't happen. So actually your thyroid, it's really important to get like a full thyroid panel, including like free T3 thyroid antibodies, for example. And that's not really common in conventional medicine. That's why I want to bring it up, because you can actually get your doctor to do that. And it really gives you better insight of actually if you have hypothyroidism or not.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why I think it's good to have them reviewed too by a functional coach, because even if you can get your doctor to run them, they might just say, oh, everything's in range or whatever. The active T3 is like the final product, right? You want, and you can see where things fell apart, maybe a couple places to get there. So the stress piece you're talking about, when I see my own thyroid conversion issues, I'm like, stress, because I think my gut is, pretty good at this point. I do a lot of detox, but you're still, sites of conversion, bloodstream, thyroid glands, gut, liver. So there could be different areas to kind of clean up if you see that conversion. But the stress management piece, it's huge, and easier said than done, but everybody's a little different, but we can all put together like different tools that work for us, whether it's getting more help around the house or whatever. Like our culture, I feel like I talk about this a lot, but I'm just gonna say, our culture is just like, it's like programmed us that we should be stressed and busy. So we can really have to choose to check out. And if you want to get a house cleaner, even though your neighbor doesn't have one, get a house cleaner. Like, it's up to you. It's your, it's your health and your time to decide all that.
Yeah, I just saw a meme yesterday on Instagram. It's talking about how we need to stop glamorizing overdoing, and like stop wearing that as a badge of honor. Like, just do the opposite,
How little can I do? We really do it. And I still, like with this concussion, I really cut down a lot, but I still realize how addicted I am to being productive. So it's been a good lesson. So there's another hormone I want to talk about that doesn't get talked about enough, I don't think, at all, which is insulin. It's such an important hormone. So tell us, like, what is insulin, and maybe why we need to know about it, even if we're not diabetic, which is probably the only time people really hear the word insulin.
That's a good one to talk about, especially when we want to talk about belly fat right now. So insulin is like I would say just think of it like a break. So when you have glucose from, your diet coming in, insulin acts as a hormone break. So it will get glucose stored as glycogen. It gets glucose taken up into your cells and stored as glycogen. And any excess glucose, for example, if you eat like too much carbs, for example, in that meal, that gets stored as fat. And when we talk about insulin, when someone gets diagnosed with diabetes, it's very, very far, like later into the stage. Actually, the insulin gets dysregulated like decades before. And this is when we really want to talk about like fructose, for example. So fructose is another simple sugar, and fructose directly contributes to fat creation in the liver, in the pancreas, even in your skeletal muscles, and in belly fat. So, women are like, I'm tired, but I can't lose weight after 40. How come, if I do a HIIT class or a spinning class, I don't lose weight anymore? It's probably because fat is being created in the liver. And if you are eating a lot of like refined carbs or artificial sweeteners, artificial ingredients, colors, and dyes, that all converts into fat. And so your fat, your belly, it forms like a pillow. So for example, in the beginning, it forms like a pillow to protect you. It's like, oh, okay, like I'm going to store all these toxins for you. And over time, that body fat, scientists have found that it's actually inflammatory. It becomes an active tissue, and it secretes more estrogen. It secretes more like molecules that are inflammatory. And so over time, you get this belly fat that isn't going to go away because it has all these toxins stored in it, and it worsens inflammation, and it can worsen like estrogen dominance.
Mm.
Yeah. And so actually, if you look at your lab work, you will only see like fasting glucose usually as part of the panel. But what you really want to look for is fasting insulin years before, because if your fasting insulin is high, it means that your pancreas is working overtime at producing insulin. So it's already giving you a sign that, okay, there might be too much glucose or coming in, there's something happening here.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we just added the fasting insulin to our lab panel this
Nice.
this last year. Yeah. So if
Yeah.
anybody's interested, we call it our Thyroid Plus panel. So thyroid's sort of the star of the show because everyone's curious about thyroid. But we do blood sugar, and we do like white blood cell count and vitamin D and stuff, because sometimes your thyroid isn't as bad as you think, but your blood sugar is worse than you think. So it's good to get a nice review of everything. And yeah, it's cool we added the insulin. We actually just had I had my first client have very low insulin, and I think it could be because she's getting close to diabetes. So that was my first time I caught that. It was really interesting. So yeah, a good number to take a look at. And if you get your labs regularly, this is kind of a self-care you can do, like especially you work with someone like us, or you order labs directly online, you can save them and compare them year after year and see how you're trending. So it's pretty interesting. And back when I was less aware and ate more processed carbs, my sugars were quite different. They were not good. And now they're right in range. But almost that like active thyroid, that's one of the hardest ones, because there's so many factors that go into making enough active thyroid hormone. So that's a great one to watch too. And that TSH to see if it's like over revving your thyroid. So fructose, I feel this is going to be an interesting conversation. So this is a lot of debate, because fructose is from fruit. I think also from honey, right? Some in honey, agave syrup, which isn't as popular now, thank God. Any other places fructose comes from?
Are you talking about whole foods or processed foods right now?
Oh yeah, let's add in the process. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, it's in high fructose corn syrup, obviously, and that's actually also in ketchup. So a lot like the Heinz brand that has high fructose corn syrup. You can find it in like fruit juice, a lot of the fruit juice that are considered like natural fruit juice, some protein bars. You really want to be careful at sifting through like these health foods, because they can sneakily add it in. and you wouldn't know, like you think you're eating like a low carb protein bar, but you're actually ingesting a lot of like artificial sweetener that's disguised as fructose, and then that gets created as fat. So that can totally hinder your weight loss journey, right? Or like your
Mm.
intention of wanting to lose weight. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, especially if there's like one favorite, cheap food you
Yeah,
still have.
right.
You're like, oh, I'm still having my
I
and
know.
and like diet sodas too can really screw
Oh
up
yeah,
your
totally.
sugars. Yeah, so you can think like, oh, I'm saving them, but it confuses your insulin kind of production and it messes up your microbiome. So maybe that one cheap food is keeping you. I've
Yeah.
I've been talking to a couple of friends recently.
Mhm.
It's the holiday time, and we bought like some marshmallows recently, but they were like $9 because they're like made
Oh,
like
it's so expensive.
pure, yeah. Because most marshmallows are made of corn syrup. It's just whipped
Yeah,
corn syrup, and I'm
yeah.
like, if I'm gonna like make my kid a hot cocoa, I'm not gonna give him the corn syrup. And is it ridiculous to buy $9 marshmallows? Yeah, kind of, but you don't need to use a lot of them. You
Mhm.
can eat
Yeah.
them, you can have them slowly. So I'm very big on corn syrup. Yeah, and I hate to see it as any kind of ingredient additive. And now if you
Yeah.
go to like Whole Foods or wherever, you can get a natural ketchup. You can even get a paleo ketchup.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's a great tip. Like look at labels.
Yeah, and it can be, really overwhelming because once you start looking, they are really everywhere, and you're just like, oh my God, like,
Oh yeah, they
yeah, just
really are.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, there's other little words to look. Another word to look for, guys, is maltodextrin. That's
Oh yeah, that's a
MSG.
big one. Mhm.
Yeah, it's in all sorts of things, and like it's in maybe a broth powder that you'll buy this time of year. So that's MSG. So if you don't want MSG, know that they just put it in a different word. So yeah, there's lots of little things to look for. So besides belly fat at this age, another super common complaint
Mhm.
is like increased pain, increased inflammation. We get that request a lot for like topics to cover. So, how is that tying into all these changes?
Excuse me. So the joint pain or whatever pain that you have in your body is also a cue. It's kind of like, how you have like skin conditions is like a sign from your body that something's happening. I see it as because we eat a lot of pro-inflammatory oils in our diet. So for example, if you're always eating out, if you're on the go, let's say you're like you used to be a working corporate mom or whatever, and you would eat in the car, eat in meetings. Those like dining out options or even like fast food options, they have a lot of pro-inflammatory oils in them, and that can really contribute to the pain that you're feeling like years now.
Wow.
So yeah, it's crazy because that's also a lot of like omega-6s that you don't want. And so if you want to counteract that right now, you really want to focus on the omega-3s in your diet that can come from nuts and seeds. If you don't like fish oil or fatty fish, you can get them from even like supplements like curcumin, like those are really good, or even like turmeric. There are ginger. There's all sorts of like little things that you could add to your diet over
Okay.
time.
So
Yeah.
adding omega-3s and adding anti-inflammatory herbs and then watching.
Yeah.
It's funny when you said inflammatory oils, I was like, oh, we don't eat any of this. But we do eat out, right? If you eat
Yeah.
out, you're getting them.
Yeah.
It always bugs me too. Like if you go into the deli at Whole Foods, it's still canola oil they use.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like,
It's kind of annoying actually in the Whole Foods, like the hot foods or the cold, whatever. Like if you see the label, sometimes they do still use canola oil.
they
And so you
do.
want to be, yeah, you really want to be like cautious about that.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Like
Yeah.
whoever, if anyone's listening who has any say in the Whole Foods hot bar,
I don't know.
we're not happy about it. That's a good point. Yeah, and I think most people in this group do cook, but there can be times I'm guilty too of just eating out too
Oh
often.
yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, you can only eat, sometimes you have your favorite restaurant or food or whatever. Just as long as you're aware that they could be using pro-inflammatory oils. You just,
Yeah.
try to boost
it's
the
like
other markers.
99% of the time they're
Yeah.
going to be.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's expensive
Mhm.
ingredient to do it otherwise.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love all this tips and knowledge. If anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in. I wonder, Melissa, can you tell us more like what you do with clients and what your process is nowadays?
Oh yeah, sure. So now I've kind of been moving away from the exclusivity of PCOS. So I work with, I just actually jumped off a call with someone who has Hashimoto's earlier this morning. So I'm doing a lot more work with, adrenal, thyroid, fertility, metabolic dysfunction. And when I say that, it means like obesity or blood sugar problems or diabetics too. So I'm kind of opening up that area more than just hormonal balance.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And you work online, I assume?
Oh yeah, everything's online right now. Even before COVID, actually, I've always been working online because I feel like it's better. You're comfortable. I do calls via phone or video, really up to the person. And also because I'm a personal trainer, sometimes I mix the calls up. Like we don't only talk about food or whatever all the time, but we do like exercise together, workouts together. And I find that's a really great bonus for my clients.
That's great. Yeah, not many people have all of that.
Yeah.
Together. I should connect you to my friend Deborah, who teaches about fitness over 50.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so she's like a great, because you're really how you exercise needs to change as you age too.
Yeah.
See, I have clients who still are going to CrossFit and then they end up with like both shoulders, like getting surgery and stuff.
Mhm.
And it's just, and you can really spiral down from
Right.
those kind of surgeries. You might not bounce back like you think. So
Yeah.
that's a great resource that you know how to do that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, your site is nourishmel.com. I think it does feature a lot of PCOS, but like you said, it's switching. You still have a really interesting blog. You must still be right.
Yeah, you can still check out the blog. I mean, I do talk about weight loss and stuff on there from before. So
yeah, I think you talk a little bit. I saw something about like toxins in the home or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And the
So that'd be
podcast
cool.
is Thriving with Nourished Mel, if you want to look it up on your podcast app. Is that correct?
Yeah. Thriving with Nourishment Health.
Nourished Mel Health. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Well, thanks
Awesome.
everybody for being on. Yeah, we'll be off next week for Thanksgiving, but we'll be back the following week. We'll see. I feel like our crowds are dwindling already. I know at this time, but I might try to do some things that are fairly timely for the holidays as we move into December to help people out. So thank you, Melissa. It was really great.
Thanks, Bridget. This was so nice. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for everyone who attended live. We appreciate it. Bye.